Good afternoon. Half-a-day, the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. The time now is 2:03. Notice for this budget hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on May 26th, followed by June 2nd. The committee will now hear Bill 276-36 COR, Committee on Rules, by the request of the I Maga'hågan Guåhan, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam, an act making appropriation for the operation of the executive branch of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2023, making other appropriations, establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions relative to the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this afternoon. We have Senator Ted Otaigwe and Senator Joanne Brown. Those testifying on Bill 276-36 COR relative to the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency are invited to the panel, and we have the Director, Ike Pareto, and I'll ask Mr. Pareto to recognize his staff that have joined him as we move along. The general rules of the budget hearing shall be as follows. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Mr. Pareto and your staff, you'll have all afternoon. You'll have more than 5 minutes, okay? Those testifying will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, please remain in the room for questions and for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda, which is the budget of the Guam Customs and Quarantine. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the budget hearing room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum will be restricted from providing oral testimony and will be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on, that you speak into the microphone. Other questions may be submitted to the committee for submission to the agency. For a response, please state your name and your title for the record. At this time, I'd ask the panel to please rise so that the Sergeant at Arms will be able to swear you in for your testimony.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you all affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Mr. Chair, you may proceed. Under oath.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. I'll now ask Mr. Pareto, the Director, to please begin your testimony on reference to your budget. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Before I begin, I would like to introduce my staff here. To my left is IASO, Mrs. Pilar Carbolito. To my right is the Chief of Customs, Vince Paris. And to his right is John Rick Mendiola, CQ Officer 3. Again, my name is Ike Pareto. I'm the Director for the Customs and Quarantine Agency. Before I begin, I would like to thank each of you for the opportunity to discuss our requested budget and provide useful information on why this budget is important to our agency. Customs and Quarantine Agency bears an enormous responsibility to the people of Guam, who place a great deal of trust in C&QA to keep them safe. As the first line of defense, Customs protects the island and the United States from dangerous people, prevent illegal entry of contraband, and facilitates lawful trade and travel. Guam Customs not only serves on the front lines of border security, but we are also working closely with our federal counterparts as well as private industry to strengthen Guam's borders, security operations, and to facilitate the movement of goods entering our island. As mentioned in the past, C&QA's highest priority is to ensure health, safety, and security of not only the people of Guam, but also the workforce. Customs officers have worked tirelessly throughout this pandemic. Despite the risks to themselves, the border now becomes more ever is vital to protecting our people from communicable diseases, and customs officers are dedicated to serving and safeguarding our people. I am extremely proud of the hard work and professionalism I see every day. These officers are dedicated men and women who continue to meet the challenges with integrity and commitment. Aside from the challenges of COVID-19, C&QA continued to combat the growing influx of illicit drugs, especially methamphetamines, at our borders. In calendar year 2021, the Customs and Quarantine Agency seized 195 pounds of methamphetamines. This amount represents an increase of 85 pounds in methamphetamine seizures at Guam's borders compared to 110 of methamphetamine seized by the agency in calendar year 2020. The increase represents a 77% increased detection amount of methamphetamine. Likewise, in calendar year 2021, Customs and Quarantine Agency seized 174 pounds of marijuana. This amount represents an increase of 111 pounds in marijuana seizures compared to 63.2 pounds of marijuana seized by the agency in calendar year 2020. The increase represents a 175% increased detection amount of marijuana. Caseload for calendar year 2021, Customs Border Enforcement officers investigated 146 recorded illicit drug interdiction cases, despite personal shortages and limited resources when compared to 89 cases investigated in 2020. Guam Customs investigated 61% more border interdiction cases in 2021 than in 2020. C&QA also has the responsibility to enhance the island's economic competitiveness and security and efficiency, and effectively processing goods and people entering our borders. In calendar year 2021, Customs processed 125,980 passengers and cleared 5,458 aircraft to include cargo flights despite the pandemic. At the waterfront, a total of 784 vessels were inspected and approximately 168,376 containers were processed and cleared. The global coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, caused significant damage to multiple private industries and government entities that depend on international travel. Guam and other countries around the world took swift, deliberate actions to limit travel. These actions were essential to minimize the risks of COVID-19's transmission. However, because of these restrictions, along with traveler fears caused by the pandemic, international volume decreased for 2 consecutive years. In fiscal year 2020, international travel to the island decreased down to 46% from 2019 levels. In fiscal year 2021, international travel decreased by 37%. As international travel continues to increase, C&QA is constantly evaluating operational needs to ensure that we mitigate security risk while processing all travelers in a timely and efficient manner. Revenue from passenger inspection fees, 85% of which are paid by air passenger, support the budget of customs operation. The pandemic caused a reduction of more than $13 million in customs passenger fee collections for fiscal year 2021. Travel associated with customs service charge are gradually recovering, but are not projected to return to pre-pandemic level in fiscal year 2023. Customs is closely monitoring travel and its impact on the passenger inspection fee as traveler volumes continue to increase. I thank the members of this committee for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to your questions. I would now like to turn to our slide presentation. Fiscal year 23 budget. The contents is our mission, the recap of our accomplishments, our divisions, our budget breakdowns, goals, and then we're going to go for questioning. I would like to start with C&QA's mission. Of course, our mission is to facilitate trade and commerce, to identify and seize contraband, apprehend violators, biosecurity mission to protect flora and fauna to include invasive species, prevent spread of communicable diseases, detain and seize harmful substances, and safeguard borders from acts of terrorism. Next slide, please. Recap of our accomplishment. Fiscal year 22 seized over 195 pounds of methamphetamine. Imports facilitated amounting to 47,000. 3,000 were X-ray container scans. 1.9 million Port Security Grant Program award. 95% completion of the C&QA boathouse and launch ramp. Graduated 4 additional drug detector dog handlers. Acquired 4 drug canines. Acquired OCO to perform customs diagnostic and assessment. Disbursement of retroactive hazardous payments to active and inactive employees. We also provided hazardous pay compensation implemented to include ensuring that officers are up to date with uniform allowance allotment that are current for the fiscal years. And lastly, our prior year's personal obligations paid were also met to include detailed pay and typhoon pay, and we've managed to complete that. Moving over to our organization, I would like to start out with inspection control. This particular division is in charge of all inspections of passengers and cargoes coming through our borders. We have the Special Enforcement Division, which also handles all criminal investigations and assessments of fines that comes to the agencies with the Federal Asset Sharing Program. Under the Special Enforcement Division, we have all these officers that are specialized in their particular sections, such as drug detector dogs, the TFOs that work with the different federal agencies. We also have a biosecurity section that takes care of all imports of plants and animals that are coming in. Then we have the logistics and support, which also does investigations on the interceptions of intellectual property rights. And this particular division also is responsible for the training of new recruits to include upgrading of the officer and enhancement of our programs within the agency. And lastly, we have the administration section, which takes care of all our processing of procurement, payroll, accounts receivables, and inspection fees. Next slide, please. Our fiscal year 23 budget requests. General fund is $15 million. Coming from the special fund is a little bit over $2 million, with a total of $17 million for the agency. With respect to C&QA arrivals, if you look at the graph of the passenger count at the airport, sharp decline of passengers and revenue at the onset of the pandemic, and the blue bars for FY22 illustrate slow return of numbers of passengers that are coming in. So monthly passenger average pre-pandemic was roughly about 140,000. Post-pandemic, at least 80% drop in passenger count, which was 5,500 monthly average. Next slide, please. Our requested budget breakdown, salaries and benefits. We start with the director's office at about 1.3. We also budgeted for CQ trainees, which is a little bit over $1 million. Logistics and support section at 1.3. Airport operation at 5.6 million. Maritime at 1.3 million. And the Special Enforcement Division is roughly about 665,583, which brings us to a total of 11,543,857. And also I'd like to include the $100,000 for overtime for the officers.
Do we need to advance the slide Director.
I'm sorry. Slide, please. Okay. Okay, so I'm moving over now to the fiscal year 23 budget requests for the contractual service. Next slide, please. Okay. So on this particular slide, we have contractual service of $438,000. Our rent for this particular request is $2.8. Our supplies is around $55,000. Our equipment is about $14,000. Drug testing is about $5,200, and miscellaneous is $52,500. Moving on down, here is on telephone is roughly about $60,000, which brings you to a total of $3,467,614. Next slide, please. On this request, we are also requesting for additional funding to cover some of the items that are listed on this particular slide. We are looking at requesting for additional administrative support staff to assist the agency. And this investment in the administrative assistance is needed for procurement, reconciliation of accounting and other grant duties. And the reason for that is because right now we have the clerks that are performing this type of duties and responsibilities, and we would like to provide the additional staffing for this particular section. We are also requesting an additional $100,000 to continue the electronic declaration form that we have implemented in 2021. The reason for this particular amount is to enhance the electronic declaration form and to put the needed information that the agency is confronted with respect to editing the declaration and also providing 24-hour service to our agency. We also are requesting $30,000 for our Oceana Customs Organization dues that is due, and this is to cover the arrears that we haven't been paying. The next is a request for our port security grant. This is a matching grant that is required for the agency to provide. We have been awarded a $1.9 million grant under the port security grant, but there is a matching matching funding that is required for the agency in order to move forward with this grant. We also are requesting $25,000 to upgrade X-ray machines at both the airport and our cargo section in the amount of $25,000. Prior year obligation, the only prior year obligation that we have right now is, I will say, is that's within in the millions is our airport rent. And since 2021, we haven't paid our airport rent. Next slide, please. Moving over to our goals for fiscal year 23. And I'm going to go to the first one. Again, we're going to increase methamphetamine interdiction. And how are we going to do that? We're going to hire 20 additional C&QA trainees for fiscal year 2023. We'll be filling 10 vacancies with additional C&QA trainees. We're going to train 8 new K9 handlers. We're going to acquire a new mobile container X-ray scanner under the port security grant. And also we're going to acquire handheld X-ray scanners that's going to be used down at the port. The next is to complete phase 1 of the Oceana organization assessment. And this is the organization that's going to come in and provide a diagnostic approach in reviewing our operation as we move forward for automation. We're also going to submit a new port security grant for additional seaport equipment that is coming up within this particular year. And lastly, we will also acquire another A&E service for C&QA satellite facility. And that concludes my presentation, my slide presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I'd like to also recognize my colleagues that have joined us this afternoon. We have the Oversight Chair, Senator Talina Nelson, Speaker Teresa Lai, and Senator Jim Moynihan. Mr. Pareto, I like your last page because you basically declared war on meth. That's good. That's a very good message. People of Guam need to be aware of that Guam Customs is not backing off, and they're going to go after the meth, catch it, or find it, detect it, and then hopefully we can get prosecution with the Attorney General's office and to the court. I like that last page. I noticed you're asking for funding for, I think that was on your slide 5, for $2 million for rent from the airport, right, to pay them? Maybe we can figure out a way how to convince them to waive it because they're running into the same issues you're running into. As long as you don't get customers, you're going to be asking the legislature for funding through the general fund, and we're not going to close you. We're going to support you. That's me. My committee will support your efforts because you're an integral part of protecting life and property here in Guam. Stop the movement of drugs. Stop the movement of whatever's illegal coming into Guam. Your folks have done a great job. You've done all you can with what you got. And I hate to say this, but excuse the language, but that was one hell of a job that you guys are doing. And you're just barely getting by. I see that, and we need to figure out a way how to help you. And with that, I noticed that the budget, you're basically asking, because you're not getting any money from the fees that you normally would charge, basically GovGuam's going to have to foot the bill for this round. And hopefully by next year, things will start changing and it starts going back down, because it used to be $6 million only a year. Now it's double. Why? Because of the pandemic, because of the crises that are going on. And hopefully next year, instead of 6, maybe it'll be 4, or maybe 3, or nothing at all, or back to 6, and then you guys will move on. I'm happy to hear that you're hiring additional customs officers. I only hope for the best.
Thank you.
Because when you succeed, the people of Guam succeed. It's about finding, detecting, and prosecuting. And with that, I'd ask the Oversight Chair, if you want to be last, ma'am. Okay. Madam Speaker, do you have any questions for the panel?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Can you just clarify the rent? So is your one slide says overall rent? Well, I don't know, but when I'm looking at this spreadsheet, it says that the office space rental is for FY22 authorized $640,000, and the FY23 governor's request is $2.8 million. And so you are also somewhere here asking for $2.8 million from the general fund and $29,000 from the special fund. Is this the current lease amount, or you're expecting an increase from $640,000 to $2.8 million?
Go ahead.
Half a day. My name is Pilar Carbolito. I'm the acting ASO for Customs. Madam Speaker, for fiscal year 2021 as well as fiscal year 2022 is the same rental amount, which totals the 2.8. However, in fiscal year 2021, we only were able to pay for, that's probably what you're looking at, is the 600 and some thousand, is just to pay for like a headquarters, the dog unit, maritime, and cargo. So our 2 million is specifically for the airport, and that's where we were unable to pay in 21. So what we're asking for in fiscal year 2023 is to pay for the entire amount to include the airport, which amounts to the 2.8. So we did not have enough funds to cover the 2 million that we owe in fiscal year 2021.
Right,
And
so-
22.
That's big, and so while the flights were decreased during FY21 and FY22, was your rent decreased?
No.
Remember they kept saying you were in communication with them, but, so that never occurred? No. All right, and then, in part of your goals, you talk about increasing to 8 new K-9 handlers. That's on top of the 4 that you put on this year in May. And with the K-9 handlers will come the K-9s?
Yes.
All right, and then, that's great. And all the additional trainees and hiring. The X-ray scanners that you are obtaining in FY23, those will assist in the detection of methamphetamine?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say satellite, the C&QA satellite facility, what do you mean by that?
What's the question?
It says acquire A&E services for a C&QA satellite facility. Is that the one at the port?
Yes, that's the one at the port, the land that we had acquired to build the container inspection station.
Okay. So the A&E.
Yes.
All right, just one sec. Your budget that you're requesting now accounts for the increase in law enforcement pay that was made a couple months ago?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And, all right. Have you received any ARP funds to assist with the rent that's overdue for 21 or
Yes.
22?
Yes, we have received ARP funds, American Rescue Funds, and in that we're looking at trying to decrease the amount that we owe to the airport. So we've pretty much allocated for 6 months. We're hoping to use our ARP. We received 3.5 million in ARP funds, and a portion of that in our plan we wanted to do is to reduce what we owe to the airport. So we were going to utilize and be able to pay at least 6 months. And of course, within our plan, we're hoping to be able to carry out other activities.
All right, if the airport told us that they had negotiated with some of their tenants to reduce the rental amounts, but do they tell you why they were not willing to do that with you?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I did approach the airport manager concerning that issue, and he mentioned to me that the reason why we were included in that is because our rental agreement is different from the vendors that they're charging rent. They're based on the agreement. The renters that are operating at the airport are only charged based on the amount that they make within that particular year. And so it's a different agreement with Customs, where we do have a lease agreement that is charged to us based on our footage and
Okay.
square feet. So that's the explanation that was given
Okay.
to me.
When does your lease agreement expire, and when are you able to renegotiate that? Are you able to terminate it now and renegotiate it?
I believe there's still 3 million.
Go ahead, Chief.
So we just, Hafre, thank you, Madam Speaker. So we recently entered into that agreement. So there are provisions that allow us to take a look at the provisions and do a renegotiation. But this is something that the last time we ever renegotiated the lease was the very first time, which is, I believe, back in the late 80s, early 90s. So we can take a look at that to see if it's possible.
You said you're using the same lease since then?
No, this is our second iteration of going
Oh.
through the lease agreement. So we negotiated the lease agreement, I'm not sure if it's like several years already, a couple years.
Okay.
So it's fairly new as opposed to the initial lease agreement, which was over 15 years old. So, but in moving forward, we can look to see if there's any areas that we could probably try to maybe renegotiate.
All right. Of course, I want to thank you for your efforts in the interdiction of drugs, and but if from your presentation, you're comparing calendar year 21 with calendar or year 2020, and both of those years were years where there were decreased activity at the airport, at least, and I guess I'm just concerned that, so they show an increase in detections, but is that just a factor because of the so few flights that were coming in during FY20,
No.
calendar year 2020? No, so you're, like apples to apples comparison here, it's an improvement on the
No,
percentage?
ma'am. Let me just say that when I became director in 2019, that's when we started seeing an increase from previous years. So
Okay.
for the next 3 years, what we're seeing based on that information is that we have continued to increase the seizures
Okay.
of methamphetamines
All
coming
right.
to our borders, and there's a reason for that.
What's-
I implemented several programs within the agency. I partnered up with the Federal Postal Inspection Service to help us in interdicting more methamphetamines coming into the post office. They have given us the leverage to work with them. They have allowed us to deputize officers, 2 officers within my agency, to work with them and deal directly with the meth that are flowing into the post office. And that, as a result, show that increase within that 2 years that we're seeing now. We are now halfway into the calendar year, and even at that, we're seeing an increase already as compared to last year. So that's the reason for that. We had to put in some sort of program to help mitigate the process of the problems that we have of the influx of meth coming into the post office.
All right, and so you have done that.
Yes.
And are we doing that, are you going to be able to do that at the airport and the port as well? I mean, increase the percentage of,
Well, we're trying, man.
Yeah.
We're trying to make sure that we close all the gaps at the port and to include airport cargo. I've been monitoring all the cases that are being mitigated through the federal courts to see whether there's some information there that will lead us to this particular port of entry, such as the port and the cargo. And we're still working with our federal partners just to make sure that if there's a gap there, that we need to continue to work together and make sure that we can plug that hole if there's a hole there.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing.
I'm hoping that the additional K-9s are going to increase the percentages as well of inspection, right? So for example, you presented at the waterfront a total of 784 vessels inspected and 168,000 containers processed and cleared. Does that mean out of 168,000 containers, 780 were actually inspected? And
Yes.
hopefully with the additional K-9s,
Oh, yes.
a higher percentage, that's like less than 1%, right? So, but an additional percentage will be physically inspected?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. What we're doing is we're trying to improve our presence down at the port. My goal is to station 2 K9s down at the port and not rotate them for at least 4 months, so that we can start seeing the officers work closely with not only customs but our partners down at the port. And that way we can help mitigate if we can detect that there's illicit drugs coming in through the port or the cargo, then that will at least show the presence of our K9s that's going to be down at the port, and not just a routine schedule. What I wanted to do is make sure that 2 K9s are assigned to the port and rotated every 4 months.
Okay. I had asked you at a previous budget hearing your inspection rates, and I'm not sure whether this is overall or just for the port or just for the airport, but at that time you had said for FY20 it was 13%, and so I was going to follow up with the other years, the inspection rates at 21, 22.
Is that for the airport?
I think so. I think it was the airport.
If we're talking about inspection rate, ma'am, the problem that we have is because of the capacity that we have at this point in time. The challenge that we have is that we have lost so much officers within the last 3 years. Just to make a comparison, when I came in 2019, there was a total complement of 127 officers. To date, we're back down to 108. Of that amount, there's about 6 or 7 that retired, and the remaining difference of that were the officers that transferred to other federal agencies. So we have managed to move forward with our inspection process, especially in the percentage area, but again, we're challenged with trying to make sure that we improve our capacity so that we can continue to protect our borders at this time.
All right. My final question is, the K9s that you received in May, how were those flown here, or how were they transported here? That
Okay.
article didn't say.
Yes, we had to secure a charter flight, that was offered by a vendor. And what it is that we communicated with them, and we provided them the information that we're having concerns and challenges with bringing in our K9s, because the other carriers have a moratorium on the importation of working dogs. So they made contact with my team, and they managed to put together some sort of an assessment in which we managed to work with GSA to help us move forward, and GSA approved the charter flight, and that's how we moved the K9s from Florida to Guam.
Do you anticipate using that again, that method in 23 for the 8 additional K9s?
If that's the only means, yes, I will do it, but I'm hoping that the other carriers will lift
up.
because charter flights are kind of expensive.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you for your work.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Tello, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues and, of course, the Customs and Quarantine. Thank you for all your hard work, too, out there. I mean, you are frontliners, really, to protect our island, and greatly appreciate the statistics that you brought to us. I know there's more that needs to be done. I mean, just listening to how many containers that you inspect compared to what comes in, it's very small. And so there is definitely a need, and hopefully we can find that. I know it doesn't help when your Customs and Quarantine special funds are coming in lower or tracking lower, but I'm noticing it is getting a little bit better. During FY22, I believe, 21, I'm sorry, there was a shortfall of $2.2 million in a shortfall for Customs and Quarantine. So my question is, did you receive your full allotment for FY21? And are you continuing to receive your full allotment in FY22?
Yes, we do we did receive our full allotment for 21, and in fiscal year 22, we continue to receive the full amount that we requested for, and that's allotted.
Okay, so my next question is, any transfer, well, let's go to reserves. I'm showing that there's a $1.9 million reserve. Is that still happening with your agency where they're taking out a percentage for placing it in a reserve account?
They are, but also if you take a look at, if you look at every quarter, the bulk of what we've received, our allotment we've received is loaded. I believe what's in reserve is, actually I'm not even sure at this point what is in reserve.
1.9.
Yeah, the 1.9. So that amount, I'm hoping that they will release within the last quarter.
So it makes me ask you, if you're not sure what was in reserve in 2022, how much in 2021 did they set aside in reserve, and did you get that money out of your reserves for 2021?
Correct. And yes, and so with fiscal year 2021, because we're still able to kind of tap into it and be able to expend, so we're looking at, there's still a little bit of funds in there, so we're trying to take care of some of our vendor payments that are still outstanding. So those are some of the balance, if you go in and you'll see the funding available.
Prior year obligations, it says in your report that you had paid off all, salary prior year obligations. So it sounds like there are other obligations that have not been vendor payables, other obligations in FY21, or are you talking about 2022?
22.
Okay, so then in 2021, what was the amount that was carried over that allowed you to?
I apologize, I don't have that in front of me, the entire.
See, that's one of the biggest issues, Mr. Chair. Agencies that were allowed this carryover, they don't even know how much was given to them for FY22 to expend. So unless you have that number, I'm hoping you do, because it kind of tells us what you're tracking in 2022. So in FY21, how much money was carried over?
I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
I just want to be able to reconcile and do a complete printout before I release, I provide that to you. Again, it's looking at the 21. I know with some of the accounts is I want to ensure that we still have some outstanding vendors that we still need to pay. So that's what we're using to tap into.
Any outstanding?
For 21.
How about for 2021? Do you have any outstanding obligations for vendors in 21?
That's definitely rent. So
just
portion of rent. And so there's a couple, again, vendors that are saying that they haven't been paid. So I need to go back and take a look at that. And so that's what I'm using is our 21 to tap into that, because that's what was appropriated in that fiscal year.
When do you anticipate to close out 2021?
Actually, as we speak, I received a call from accounting asking me if I could clear all that. So I'm hoping within the next month that I will be able to reconcile the account so that we can zero those out, because accounting is preparing already.
Okay, and then all those questions I asked, hopefully it'll be in that account, and then
Yes.
our oversight chair can,
Yes.
pass this on to us,
Yes.
so that when we go for your bill,
Yes.
Go after your budget, we'll know
Yes.
exactly how much is really needed. Because I'm seeing here that your only request, well, not only, 1.7 million additional funding is what you're requesting for? 1.7 million? For FY23? There's a difference.
Are you
No, I'm sorry. It's less. No, it's more. 15,448,048 was in FY22. FY23, you're asking for 17,078,476,
Correct. Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's an increase with that request. And I noticed that you're asking for more out of the general fund because the anticipation of, the special funds, it's doing a little bit better compared to last year at the same time. I think it's only like 800,000 short compared to last year, was close to $1 million plus almost 2 million. That being said, of this additional couple million that you're requesting for, is this due to the pay raises? It all has to do with rental?
The additional 2.6 million we're asking for?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's not for the pay raises. We're actually, I was going to say part of it is, and I said it last year, and I'm an army of one. And so that's the reason why I'm really backlogged and trying to close out 21. So I'm hoping that with your consideration that you'd support us in hiring 2 additional administrative assistants to really help me out with the procurement, the reconciling, so that I can concentrate on the reconciling and the budget. So I know last year I asked for your consideration, so I'm asking again. So that's part of our additional funds. In addition to that is we still owe for the OCO dues, our port security grant, there's a 25% match. So we've been awarded 1.9. Again, hoping with your consideration that you'll be able to assist us in that. And
what is that amount, the 25% match? What is that total?
$425,000.
Okay. Okay, so it's 2 bodies, administrative, 25% match at 425.
In addition, also for the maintenance of the x-ray machines we have up at the airport and at cargo, we're looking at $25,000. We're requesting for the maintenance of it.
Stand
yes.
by. That's on slide 5.
Okay.
Okay, you might want to state that so that
Okay, slide 5.
the senator will know
Okay.
where you're
Also,
getting.
yes, yes. Okay.
Save her the writing when she can see
Okay.
it.
Okay, I see it here. Thank you.
Yes.
So to 12.26, thank you, Mr. Chair. That covers it quickly. You're familiar with the, Mr. Director Pareto, you're familiar with the Autonomous Agency Collection Fund? Are you familiar with that, where agencies like the airport as well as the Port Authority of Guam, in lieu of taxes that they pay, that they provide services to certain agencies like EPA, Customs and Quarantine? And the responsibility of these agencies is to $3.5 million a year to provide in lieu of taxes services to agencies. You're not familiar with that?
No.
Okay, well, this is something the OPA's office did a report on. The airport is claiming that because of a bond covenant that they're not, would not be able to do any type of, I guess, fees to be directed toward that fund. However, in the report, they claim that they are assisting the airport, in your rental. But I know the Port Authority as well, supposedly, they're supposed to give at least $3.5 million yearly in assistance. It's called the Autonomous Agency Collection Fund. And if you would like, you can just call my office. I'll give you the public law and the law that creates this account to do this. And this is something that you really need to, pursue on helping on your rent, because they're obligated. It's in law to provide that in lieu of taxes. Okay?
Senator, did you say that's coming from the airport?
Oh, it goes both airport and the Port Authority. Yeah, if you look at that law, you'll see that law. It's clear as to their contributions because they don't pay taxes. It was shown here in FY21, there was a transfer out of Customs and Quarantine of $376,229. That was in FY21. Do you know why this money was taken out of Customs?
No.
No.
Are you familiar with this withdrawal out of your budget in FY21?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you need to look into that and find out why it was transferred out. It was $376,229 FY21. In FY20, there was a transfer out. This is the governor transferring money out of your account, okay? In FY20, it was 76,584. So you need to find out if,
Okay, I'll look into it.
just to make sure they don't take money out. I mean, you guys are hurting enough. I mean, we know you need the funding to help protect our borders.
All right,
You don't need anybody going into your account and taking money out, transferring money out without any good explanation. So you might want to look into that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you for that information.
Sorry. Thank you. The TOW, regarding the table of organization and equipment, has it been adopted by Customs and Quarantine? Okay, it's already up in place and going? Okay. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, is Customs being able to get any of that funding from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed by the federal government? Any funding there?
Yes, I've managed to communicate with Mr. Tyron that's
Yes.
handling that program.
Uh-huh.
And I did explain to him to provide us some guidance whether our agency can fit in any of those programs, because we definitely are looking for a funding source for the container inspection station at the port. And he did agree with me that yes, he's looking into making sure that to ensure if we can tap in on those particular grants. And I provided them all the documentation as it relates to the container inspection station and the reason why we're going to build that particular facility. So we have all the documentation. I've met with him and we presented his office the necessary information.
Can
And
any of-
hopefully that we can get some
Yeah,
sort of
can-
funding from that.
Can any of that money be used for the maintenance of the x-ray machines? You might want to look into that, on at least in that category, you know, of helping on the port when it comes to any kind of mechanical or growth in that direction. So if you can ask Mr. Tyron, you know, to help you out in that perspective. The other one is, since we're on federal funding, the ARP funding that was provided to you, it was $3.5 million, as you mentioned. But you know, as we just received the latest report, and there's still a balance of $3.2 million in the ARP funding. Do you have plans on using this? Do you have a printout of how you're going to spend that 3.2 in the next 2 years?
Yes, ma'am, we do have a plan. And I'll
Do you have that, a
EASO,
copy to share with us?
explain that to you.
We do have an ARP, American Rescue Plan, and I'll be able to get back to you on that. I'll provide you guys a copy. And it identifies, did you want me to just highlight some of the areas, or I'll provide that?
Just provide the copy to
Sure.
me and I'll make sure my colleagues get it, okay?
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
this is very important for us, you know, as we look at your budget and see where, you know, any kind of savings we have. I mean, fortunately, we're in an artificial economy, and I can't stress that as much. We're probably not going to see, you know, this type of influx into our economy or into our general fund. So how you're going to stretch this money and make it work is very important as we move forward. So if you can, please provide us that plan. It'll be very helpful as we move forward. Other than that, you said there's 2 that are retiring. How many people are retiring, officers are retiring from Customs?
Go ahead, Chief.
That number will vary, but on average, right now, Cycle 1 and Cycle 2, we are seeing that their work history with the agency is well over, is it 25 years. So if you're looking, they could retire at any time. On average, we've been losing, this last fiscal year, I think we retired 5 or 6 officers, and some of them are already like from Cycle 1 and Cycle 2. What you're looking at, including myself, over 30, I've got 34, 35 years of service, so all the leadership, starting from even this Customs Officer 3 with Officer John Rick Mendiola, he could go at any time. So It's just a matter of really identifying and maybe polling our staff. So I'm thankful you asked that question, because then what it does is that it tells us that we need to start planning for the future,
Right.
force management. We need to start training up the guys from the bottom to start taking on greater levels of duties and responsibilities, and then also mentor the next generation of leadership, because with any organization, it's not just one small area that you're concerned with. As you progress in your rank and you start to get higher and higher, you start to see everything on the table in your organization that needs some kind of attention. And so many of the guys who are in the ground inspecting, doing the hard work, the tactical operations, they may not see strategically the things that we see at our level. So we're hoping that when it gets to that point, we're going to be able to hire and retain people and come up with a plan, if you will, to ensure that every level, from the tactical operation to the supervisory to the strategic leadership, the core competencies are met. So getting back to how many are going to retire, it could be 3, it could be 10, it could be 15. It just all depends on what's happening in the next few years. Many of these officers are dedicated to customs and the island. I kind of just feel like when they approach me and they tell them, they kind of feel like they're a little left out in certain considerations, but we're trying our best to be able to make it a better environment than when we first entered into the Customs Service.
Thank you, Officer Harris. Is there a mandate, an annual of a training cycle for 40, up to 40 new officers every year that's required?
In the previous budget law, there is a provision that allows us to hire 20, but we're hoping with your consideration if we can maybe change that number to ensure that there's a minimum maybe of 30. Because when we take a look at the number of officers that we need to bring in, and realistically, when you think of the port and the satellite inspection facility and biosecurity and all these other areas that are in need of people, and then you're taking a look at when we used to have 127 in the last 3 years, and then it's down to 107, the program requirements for the agency and meeting our mission objectives really is going to be around 230 to maybe even 300 officers. We got program areas that are undermanned and are in need of capacity building. Mm-hmm. So going back to, yes, there is
a mandate
that mandate
requires
that
it,
allows
but
it
I thought it was
for
40.
3 years.
I thought it was 40. You're saying it's 20?
It's 20.
Okay, 20, but you want to increase it to about 30. Makes sense.
Yes.
That being said, my last question, the concern with this is that if you're losing that many officers yearly, then is there a huge amount of overtime payment that is given? And what is the overtime? I guess I can ask your ASO. What have you paid in overtime in FY21, and what is the current one for 2022?
I'll pass it to Pilar, but normally we don't really try to ask for too much overtime. We're trying to live within our means, but because of the attrition
DOC
rate,
should take some classes from you.
yeah. So we don't ask for much money, but I think I'll pass it on to Pilar
fired.
to quantify the amount.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Red.
Senator, if I'm not mistaken, I think roughly for fiscal year 2021, we did spend about 70 grand on
70?
overtime, about $70,000.
Okay, and what are you at so far right now in FY22?
We're asking for 100.
So in 23, we're asking for 100,000.
Oh, for fiscal year 23, we're asking for 100,000.
100,000?
Yes.
Okay, but in where are you at right now in FY22?
Yeah.
So in 22, we received 68,195, and right now we're probably at 52,000 that we've expended.
Good, trying to stay within your budget. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate, and thank you again for all the hard work. I greatly appreciate what you're doing for us and keeping us safe. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. And as you mentioned, you're looking at recruiting. Do you have a waiting list of folks that are trying to apply for customs? Just a simple question. Do you? Do you
Yeah.
have a waiting list at
Yes.
DOA?
There is a listing right now.
No, you have a waiting list. In other words, you have people applying and they're waiting to process. Do you have a waiting list at DOA? Just that simple? No. Okay. Thank you. Senator Brown, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to ask, because of course, prior to the pandemic and the impact to your revenue stream with the decrease in passengers coming into the island, how are you going to offset that, since it's been the general fund that subsidized during the pandemic pretty much to get customs through with your obligations? As that revenue stream, we are hopeful that it will continue to increase. How are you going to offset that? Where does that money go versus the amount that the general fund has now come in to subsidize customs? How is that going to be addressed?
Well, we know that the pandemic has really impacted our agency. And for the last 2 years, we've been relying on the general fund to meet our operational needs. There is a mechanism on hand that we can put forward. And of course, you probably know that customs within the last 20 years have been self-sustaining because of the passenger service inspection fee. But if you look at the challenge that we have right now, our tourist industry is just starting to come back. And from my perspective, it's not prudent for me right now to even mention something about adjusting rates because of the way the economy is moving. And I've met with the front office on the challenges that we have, and the only thing that I can say right now is that until such time that we can fully recover from this pandemic, that we can get back with our funding source, such as the special fund. The only thing I can say is that we need to continue to rely on the general fund to continue protecting our borders.
My point is, as your revenue continues to increase, and we anticipate it will, I don't think it's going to probably increase in the near future, at least from what we're hearing from the tourism sector, probably for the next 2 to 3 years. But this year, I anticipate you will receive additional funds that you weren't receiving last year or the year before. How is that going to be included to offset what is being subsidized by the general fund? Because otherwise, you're going to be receiving your additional revenue plus what the general fund is subsidizing, and it's not my desire to continue to see customs subsidized by the general fund, because we anticipate, at least I do, I anticipate that the general fund revenues and all the federal money we've been basking in is going to decrease. And there are other critical obligations in the government. So how are we going to offset every additional dollar you get from your revenue stream with what is subsidized by the general fund? What mechanism is there any? It doesn't sound to me like anything's put in place. Because I don't want to wait till you can carry your whole load that we're going to transfer it from the general fund. I expect it's going to happen over time, and I'd like to see the decrease of the general fund money going into customs as your revenue stream increases to cover your cost.
Correct. That is actually, like right now tracking, we are seeing what we've collected from the passenger inspection fee and the cargo inspection fee, like in fiscal year 2021. And so in working with accounting directly, that's what they're looking at, and that's what we're trying to reconcile so that the offset can be done based on what we've collected, what's in the account, what she can see in the account, and then offset it. And that's how come working with accounting in identifying there are true actual amounts, so they could offset. So that's for fiscal year 21. Likewise, speaking with accounting in 22, that's also what we'll be doing. So is the mechanism there is they will offset. And again, working directly with accounting, they're well aware of how much we've transferred or loaded in the revenue accounts to our accounts, to customs appropriation accounts.
I just think we'd like to see a formal process. I mean, if it can be done without including in your legislation and budget, that's fine, but I think it needs to be a transparent process so that we know if you're raising $100, we're not getting another $100 from the general fund. You know, I don't want you to double benefit from what the government and the rest of the government is sacrificing to accommodate customs. Ultimately, I would like to see customs return to its own capabilities of operating within its own revenue stream. I don't see this as a permanent situation, nor would I desire to see it as such. With regards to your drug testing, I see you did put 5,000 plus for your, it went down to 5,200 this year. Have you done any drug testing on your designated positions in the past year, 2 years, 3 years?
So actually, we are in direct coordination with Department of Administration, HR, and we're in the process of conducting the TDP testing.
Have you done any drug testing in the last year, 2 years, 3 years?
No.
No. And so you are now going to, do you know there's an existing executive order, not by this administration, but one that does require regular drug testing of all designated positions to Governor of Guam. So you also have not been in compliance with that. Why? Mr. Director.
Truthfully.
Well, we have approached DOA in making sure that we move forward with our purchase order to start drug testing. But the process is just too slow for us, and we've been waiting. We've submitted the paperwork down to DOA, and it's taking so long for them to just process them.
And any reason? I'm sure you see the Director of Administration at cabinet meetings and other events. Any reason why not, if you're funding your own testing?
Yes.
You will be funding your own testing?
Yes, that's true.
And I only bring it up because particularly the work that you do with regards to protecting our borders, of course, I appreciate to hear that certainly that Customs has increased the amount of illegal drugs that you've been able to seize that has been coming into the island. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the officers that are guarding our borders also are not on drugs and not involved or engaged in illegal activity. The possibility of that happening, very good possibility.
That's true.
Just by nature, just looking at the record in the past, be it DOC or other law enforcement, we unfortunately see that those that are guarding the hen house sometimes end up taking over the hen house. And I think we need to be concerned about that. And right now, because we do have a pandemic of drug abuse on this island, we want to ensure that those that are paid by the people of Guam and entrusted the responsibility of protecting our borders are not engaged or involved in illegal activity. Because unlike some in leadership that say we don't have a drug problem at the Port Authority, I know better, and I think those that have worked there over the years know. Drugs are coming into the island. I don't think they're solely coming in through the Postal Service, simply because a lot more time and effort has been focused on that. There are other ways I'm sure they're looking at bringing the drugs, because while everything else pretty much is going up, I mean, our groceries, our gas, our power bill, the one thing that's consistently over the last few years continued to go down is the cost of crystal meth on the streets. And so it's still coming in, even though the continued increased efforts of being able to try and capture as much as you can, they're still coming in. And there's only, if it ain't coming to the airport, it ain't being thrown off a boat somewhere, possibility of it being in a container is fairly good, primarily because the amount of actual inspections done by Customs on the containers is a small percentage of the over 100,000+ containers that come in. Granted, I mean, you have a large amount of commodities coming in versus the actual amount of inspections. Even if you don't do the physical inspection of the container, even if you use your vehicle to test and drive around and determine is there anything in there, it's still such a small percentage of the amount of cargo coming in. So obviously, drugs are still getting into the island. I just think, just to ensure that you can say, hey, my people are tested, my people are clean, I think that would be a very good message to send out to the community at a time when we continue to see drugs to proliferate and continue to be a problem here on the island. The other thing you mentioned with regards to, and I appreciate all the efforts that have been put in place to increase your number of drug detecting dogs. And you mentioned you're going to put 2 at the Port Authority and you're going to have them stationed there for 4-month period and rotate. How are you going to be able to do surprise inspections? Because I will tell you, if I wanted to bring drugs into Guam, and I had my connections at the port that are moving cargo, and I have my connections in Customs to know which containers to ask for, because it's Customs that asks what containers you want. Customs determines what containers are inspected. I'll just make sure my container's not inspected, right? That's what I do. So how are you going to address that? You might have the dogs there, but it's a question of which containers the dogs are inspecting. Because they're not going to be, unless you're going to have them inspect every single container coming into the island. You can't do that with the amount of hours per day that they can actually have the dogs out there doing inspections, right? So how are you going to do that so that the players that are there don't know how and when and which container is going to be inspected?
Well, the approach to that Senator, is that there's not only one section that determines what containers are to be inspected. There's other team that are also scrutinizing the manifest, aside from the officers that are working the line, that also makes that determination. So it's not only the officers at the port that are stamping documents stating this is containers are to be held or inspected. There's another team that I created down at the port known as the MARSET, and this team also have access to manifest, and they can come in and they can also identify which containers are to be inspected and not just the line officers, just to balance out what you're saying.
With regards to screening, at what point will you be able to reach 100% inspection of all containers? Are you waiting for the bigger scanners that you could actually drive through? What are you adding on beyond the mobile vehicle that you've had for the last, gosh, almost 8-9 years now?
Senator, I would be lying to you if I tell you that we're going to inspect 100% of the containers down at the port. It does not work like that. If we were going to do 100% inspection down at the port, nothing is going to move down there.
My question, again, with regards to your scanners, I'm asking specifically what type of scanners are you looking at acquiring? Because if you do get, there are different types of scanners. If you get the scanners that you drive through, they will be able to inspect every container. They will be able to scan every container simply by driving through it. So I'm inquiring, aside from your mobile vehicle that you've had the last 8 or 9 years, what other capacity with regards to scanning are you adding on?
Go ahead.
Assuming that I assume when you get your facility built, you would want to have those scanners that allow simple drive-through. It would be able to scan 100% every container that's going out of the port.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Brown, for that question. So when we get the satellite inspection facility built up, we're looking at acquiring a fixed X-ray unit, which would be capable of conducting the scans of every single container that gets sent down towards the satellite inspection facility. So we're able to increase our capacity. But in addition to that, we're also looking at increasing our capacity with technology and other areas to ensure that we're doing a wide range of enforcement actions to ensure that we're protecting our borders. But with any tool, right? So we learned a hard lesson with the container, with the backscatter van, and that's maintenance.
Yes.
The maintenance costs for per year is kind of up there. So one of the things that we want to make sure in moving forward is that when we get this facility built and we get this fixed X-ray up and running, that we are able to appropriately get the service contracts and ensure strategically that in 3 to 5 years we still have a very good operational piece of equipment. And everybody in the government of Guam knows that when you have pieces of equipment through daily use, something's going to happen. So more than likely, we're also going to have to look at maybe acquiring a second, perhaps, or maybe even a tertiary method of conducting the screening as well.
So besides the additional, and again, I appreciate the fact that you are and have been able, considering all the hurdles that you've had to jump to be able to get these drug inspection dogs to Guam. Is there anything else you will be adding on until you actually get this facility built, where you do have these drive-through scanners? Is there any other type of technology that's going to be employed to be able to scan containers or boxes or whatever may be coming in?
So in addition to the scanners, we're also looking at building up in other capabilities, and we're also looking at personal X-ray detection equipment, other equipment and technology. They call them, for lack of a better word, true narc, where we're able to take a device and analyze molecules, and it'll be able to help us, in other words, work smarter, not harder. In other words, if you have like 100 containers, you're not just going to send all your bodies out to do the search the container, when perhaps maybe there's only like 5 of them you really need to look at. So we're looking at analyzing, with the help of the Oceana Customs Organization, to take a look at our processes, take a look at our risk management information systems, take a look at our technology, take a look at our mandates, and find out where we can capitalize on ensuring that we're in line with the industry, because we realize that we're a little behind as far as like customs inspection entities are concerned. Some of our brothers and sisters in the Oceana region are a little bit more ahead of us in some areas, but we realize that, so we're making attempts to be able to work smarter, not harder.
I appreciate it. I mean, American Samoa is ahead of us with regards to the size of their scanning equipment for cargo, and they have nowhere near the amount of containers, obviously, coming in. But I certainly appreciate your response to my questions, and that's just, I think those issues, if you can take them to heart. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. And in reference, Director, in reference to your budgeting on special funds and general funds, when the amount of special funds starts coming in, because it's appropriated, if it ain't appropriate, you can't just use it, okay? Just a reminder.
That's
So when
true.
the money comes in,
That's true.
if you need it, ask us, and then we'll just appropriate it to you, so you can do it for your other missions, okay? We're not saying we're gonna deny you, but whatever you're appropriate, that's what we wanna back you for first, okay?
Duly
Senator-
noted, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Senator Mullen, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Customs, for your presentation. I appreciate the information provided. We're looking forward to assisting you with the budget requests that you need. Couple of things I wanted to talk about, and I'm glad to see the additional capture of illegal substances, to be meth and marijuana as well. Sometimes I'm glad that happens, but also I'm wondering, is it just because there's more coming to the island? But at least we're doing our best with what little you have. You know, we really want to help support, and there's a couple of bills that are out there to help with the secure facility that you're talking about, right? One was 21836. That the goal with that bill was to provide $15 million so you can actually build that facility. We understand we had to make some compromise because of the budget situations, but now there's another bill, 251, that gives you $2 million for the A&E, right? Architect and engineering of that secure facility. This body also assisted you, the Customs, to extend that lease agreement with the Port Authority that was about to expire. So now, again, we're up against another deadline, and we're hoping we can get you this money as soon as possible to at least start it off before the 37th Guam legislature comes on in, right? This has been how many years we've been trying to do this. In your presentation on your 2023 goals, you discuss the acquire A&E services for C&QA satellite facility. Explain that again with what the 36 has done to extend the property lease with the Port Authority. We have a couple of bills that we're hoping to assist you. How is this working with your relationship with the administration on where you project this money to come from? And how can we better assist you?
My answer to that, Senator, and thank you for that question. Again, as Senator Tello Taitigas mentioned, is there any sort of funding that we can appease ourselves with the infrastructure bill that was passed by the U.S. Congress? I've met with Tyron Taitano, and I've requested Tyron to see whether we can fit that program or project within that infrastructure bill that we're trying to build down at the port. And I met with him, and he said that he is willing to look at it. I've provided all the information to him, and I told him that everything that we have been putting together, we even have a conceptual design for them to look at, and hopefully that he can assist us in finding the funds that's needed to build this facility through the infrastructure bill that was passed in Congress.
Thank you, Director. Good suggestions as well, and what we're saying is the administration would consider it, right? It depends on when this finally comes out from Congress, which is...
I'm hoping that they will support that, because, you know, they have assured me that they support that particular project, and I'm looking forward in making sure that I continue to follow up with the administration in securing the funding to build that facility.
Okay. Like the two bills that are introduced, we're hoping they move it forward as well, but we never know, right? Like the administration, it's a great idea, it's a great suggestion, but still, circumstances may change. I'm wondering in your budget request, if you would consider, or if you have, consider including an amount in your budget request to us to say, at least give me some money for this architect and engineering of the facility to get it started. Would you consider that as a suggestion, and let the committee chair
I will
to
consider that, yes.
Okay. Let's try from every place, right? And whoever gets them first, then we don't need the others, right? So maybe the committee chair would entertain that if you put it in writing to the committee. Okay.
Definitely. Thank you.
For the chief there, we appreciate that we're looking at additional hires for customs, right? And that's great. And recently you had a news article, I think you were interviewed by maybe PDN, possibly, of what you're planning to do. Can you just reiterate that for us, please?
Okay, so I as the senior classified operations guy for the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, I grew up in customs. I think pretty much everybody here did, with the exception of Ms. Pilar. And so as you grow up, you start to see things that you notice it needs improvement. And one of the things that is a little like a learning experience for us is that when our guys are going through the Customs Academy and then they learn everything they need to know about becoming competent in what they do as inspectors, in around 2 years, a notice comes out from the federal government about openings in Customs and Border Protection, and we lose people. I believe the director mentioned it earlier. We had a 127, 128 when the administration first came in. We're down to about 108. Regardless of this 18% pay increase that just came out, thank you to the government, thank you. However, it's not enough. What happens is that these officers who come in and they get trained up for 2 years, normally will get picked up by the federal government. Guam Customs officers normally start off with the federal government as a GS-9. So if you compare what a GS-9 makes compared to what a customs officer 1 makes with 10, 15 years of service, there really is no difference. So what's frustrating for me is that as the lead guy, it's like, how do we retain personnel? How do we make them want to stay? It's kind of like we're a recruiting conduit for the federal government. So we need equipment, we need supplies, we need capacity building. And thank you to the legislature, we found ways to be able to do that. Thank you to the administration, we've been building our capacity slowly. But if we're not careful, there's been talk about federalization of the service. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? That remains to be seen. All I can tell you is that I've been hearing it, not just internal talk within our customs officers, I've been hearing it out in the community. I've been hearing certain leaders talk about it. And so maybe that's one of the things that might be broached. But before we go down that road, you just got to make sure you know what you're going to get at the end of the day. For me, what I see, at least for our Customs and Quarantine Agency needs, is that all the resources that we did not get, we're going to get. We'll cut through a lot of the red tape because there's a vast funding source that's readily available. Right now, the way we work our budgets and the way we have to address everything through some kind of fee adjustment is really cumbersome. And when you lose institutional knowledge that allows us to move forward, you have to retrain people. So one by one, people are coming in, they're learning the ropes, and then eventually we get to a point, even though we have the capability and an administrative rule that allows us to address certain things through rate changes, they're not as fast as opposed to like being part of an organization like the Customs and Border Protection, where it seems like funding seems to be readily available. If we did have the funding and we did have the equipment, the personnel, the supplies, the vehicles, and the technology, I say that this is the best law enforcement agency you could probably ask for, and it definitely would be the premier border law enforcement agency, not just here, but in the region. I believe that we are the best. I just think that we're challenged with equipment, personnel, resources, technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. In the previous budget, the body also appropriated, I think it's $75,000 to assist the Post Commission in a study that the late Dr. Fee was promoting, and I understand you're continuing with that. I'm wondering how far has that gone with the Post Commission, and explain to us what they're actually trying to do with the discrepancy between peace officers. Thank you.
Okay, so I think there's a little bit of maybe a miscommunication on the amount of money that actually is allocated. That $70,000, if I'm not mistaken, is actually going towards the salary for the executive director. In going through the budget, I noticed that there was only, I think, 2 line items. One was, I think, like money for a conference, and then the other one was like funding for the executive director position. But if you take a look at the amount of money that is allocated for that position, that translates roughly to around, like, let's say around $40,000 for an executive director who is a one-man show in an entity that needs several support bodies. So going back to the post initiative that was previously identified in the budget law that came out, was that the legislature gave the post authority to come up with creating a force structure and at the same time create a pay structure. The latter part is a little bit more complicated for us to do, but what we have managed to do was we did a gap analysis and found that there are similarities in many of the law enforcement entity officer positions. However, the pay grade assigned is different. So one of the simplest ways to be able to do it is to come up with a generalized rank structure. And I know that I keep going back to the military as a model, but they're a model that is very successful. In the enlisted ranks, you have enlisted 1 through enlisted 9 ranks, and in the officer ranks, you have the officer 1 all the way up to officer 10. Each of these different positions are broken down into several tiers. The lower tiers are your tactical operational tiers. So you got your E1, E2, E3, and E4. So you can translate that into a force structure for law enforcement. You can say LEO 1, 2, 3, 4. So you start off with your basic training. Those are the guys who come in as an E1. And if you had education up to a degree or whatever, they start you off as an E3. Translate that to the law enforcement force structure. What happens is that if you come in with a high school diploma, we start you off as a LEO 1. If you come in with your basic law enforcement academy certificate, we give you an LEO 2. If you've got your degree, 60 credits or above, we start you off as an LEO 3. But your title remains the same. You're a trainee, but you have different pay levels associated with it. When you graduate, my intent is that when you graduate and you go into your law enforcement agency specific training and you go through either 6 months through a year, when you graduate, you become an LEO 4 for Customs and the police department. That's your PO1. In the police department and Customs and maybe some other agencies, we also have an apprenticeship program that we're looking at. So my intent is that when you go through the apprenticeship and you complete it and you got time and great time in service, you will automatically, non-competitively promote to the next level. The challenge right now is that here in the government of Guam, the way the rules are written is that either you go through a KPP, which is a little bit more complicated, or you have to announce the position, you have to stratify the position, you have to interview for the position, and not everybody gets promoted. Thereby, you end up with an entity where after 34 years of service, you have a customs officer or a police officer one who has been with the agency with such a vast amount of institutional knowledge, but he's relegated as a officer one. So what this force structure does is that it builds on the foundation of what you learn in your basic training, if you will, and it builds up, and it implements what is called a career ladder, like in the federal government. Career ladder is like when you come in as a GS 5, 7, or 9, whereas in here, we pick you up, you start your apprenticeship, you can promote non-competitively up to the position that is non-supervisory. That's where we start to compete. So what it allows us to do is that we create the environment for career-minded individuals to be able to move forward and progress in their careers. It allows for human resources personnel to be able to appropriately classify you, and it allows the supervision and the leadership to be able to give a better assessment of your capabilities. And then and also included is that we also have another tier for first line, second line supervisors, and then the final tier is where you have your strategic leadership. So all of that in a nutshell is kind of what we're trying to accomplish, so that we don't have a stagnant a career mechanism that is stalled from the very beginning. If you really take a look and you study how long this system has been in place, the current system in the government of Guam, it's been many years. I think we need to grow. We need to proactively look at, there are new generations of leadership and workers out there. We have the X, Y, Z, and the new generations. The things that worked in the past don't necessarily work, or they don't translate. So many of the officers today in today's generation are migratory. If they don't like where they work, they're going to get up and go. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an environment where if you're willing to do the hard work, and we will do what we can to help move you along. So I'm hoping that this kind of explains it, and I'm sorry it's a little long-winded. But
Thank you, Chief. So the force structure, and we're hoping the Post Commission is coming together on this, so all the peace officers would have an agreement to present to the legislature to how this career ladder would work, and they would stay within their agencies for long term. You're explaining the amount provided in the last budget didn't really assist you as much as necessary. In this current budget, do you identify that? Are you asking for additional to get that goal, what you just explained to us?
So, if you're asking me in my capacity as the post the post chairman, I say yes, of course, I need money. I need capacity building. I need to build the organization. If you run an organization with all bodies are not paid or they're not full time, that's the Post Commission. Nobody there is full time. We have yet to hire the executive director position. We're working on it. But really, when you take a look at the salaries and benefits, it translates to like about 40 grand. And unless you're really gung-ho into trying to do what you can.
So your solution then would be how much in this budget proposal to us?
Well, I haven't really taken the time to analyze it, but I think that if you put out enough funding to cross the gap for the executive director and maybe 2 more administrative support pieces, and maybe even remove the body of the post from GCC, we would go a long way with being able to build capacity.
I'm going to go ahead and hold Senator Moylan down because we want to settle the customs.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Go ahead,
Senator Moylan, and wrap that one up.
Yeah, thank you to the panel, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Now I'll ask the oversight chair to ask questions. Then I'll make comments in reference to what we were discussing. Senator Nelson, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I almost thought we were in a post-commission budget hearing. Okay, very good. Director, Chief, I'd like to thank all of you here today representing Customs and Quarantine Authority. I'd also like to thank the officers for the outstanding work they do at protecting our ports of entry, given the resources that they do have. I do have some questions on the testimony that you presented, paragraph 4, where you did a breakdown of the amount of methamphetamine seizures and the amount of marijuana seizures on the island of Guam. I was interested in knowing, within this breakdown, how much of it was seized at our ports of entry, at the airport, at the post office, and at the Port Authority of Guam. Can you provide that breakdown?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. Off the top of my head, I can tell you right now that 95% of all those seizures are coming from the post office.
From the post office, okay. And what type of activity is at the Port Authority of Guam that contributes to the interdiction of drugs? Are you not receiving any type of alerts or any type of notification of drugs entering at the Port Authority of Guam? Do you have the resources to maintain operations to even identify if there are drugs entering through the Port Authority of Guam?
Yes, with respect to that question, I've been meeting with our federal counterparts, not only the local police, to find out whether or not we have valid information insofar as the type of drugs that are coming in at the port. And right now, I don't have any other information that can solidify to you that, yes, this amount is coming in from the port, because I have no information. I've met with DEA to see if there's any update insofar as where we can improve and close the gap at the port. I've met with HSI, yes, U.S. Customs, Border Patrol inspection organization, and even them, you know, we managed to sit down and go over some of this particular concerns. And right now, unless they're not telling us that there's an ongoing investigation that they're working on. But my concern, and in relate to your question, is that we've managed to sit down with our federal counterparts and present it to them by saying that we've been making this amount of seizures at our ports of entry, but we haven't seen any major organization being taken down. And so from there, I can't further say that I have solid information that meth or any other type of illicit drugs are coming in through cargo or the port.
So is the relationship for the operations of C&QA at the port, is the relationship between DEA and the Coast Guard counterparts, is that when they will alert you or give you some notification that they do see some type of criminal activity or possibility of drugs coming into that area, and then is that when C&QA executes their inspection?
Well, if we get any type of information, definitely we work with them. Okay. Not only them, but also even the port security that are down there to see what we can do to mitigate the concern. But as of this time, you know, I haven't really received any solid information from my perspective insofar as any type of illicit drugs that are flowing in through the port. I'm not saying that there's none, but information is not there at this point in time.
And how often are containers inspected on a daily basis by C&QA?
That's a routine inspection, and I'm going to refer that to the chief.
Okay.
He's in charge of operation.
So the way that the inspections normally work is that when you're presented with the bills of lading and the invoices, there are officers who are actually taking the time to take a look and screen it. And we also make use of the X-ray team who receive the information ahead of time, and then as well as if there's any type of intelligence received and then we make use of the Maritime Contraband Enforcement Team. So all these units are working together to be able to conduct inspections. However, because of the limited resources, the question asked earlier is when do we get to 100%? And the reality is that we can't. And I think that we try to focus on trying to do at least 10%.
Chief, forgive me, I'm going to interject before you digress into another area. My question was specifically, how often are inspections done by C&QA on the containers at the port on a daily basis?
That's every day.
Senator Jean-Ric Mendiola, for calendar year 2022, we conducted approximately 1,900 container inspections.
Okay, and how many containers for year 2022 came through the ports?
How many came through the port? 168,000.
168,000?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not too many. I just like to add that in addition to the physical inspection of the containers, there were containers that were x-rayed by our x-ray units. And if that did not require physical inspection, that in itself was considered an inspection.
So maybe a percentage would be 5 to 10% was inspected at the port for 2022?
I would have to calculate that. But however, with what we're requesting for assistance for the port security grant, we would like to expand our X-ray scanning capabilities with the co-share amount so that we can pursue another X-ray machine, increasing our capacity, and knowing that the X-ray machine that we have down there is about 8 to 10 years old. So
Right, so in the last budget, we appropriated money for you to secure 2 X-ray machines. Okay, thank you. Okay, very good. So the way the post office works, right? You get a lot of intelligence reports to alert you to utilize your K-9 units, to stand up your K-9 units and to check the postage coming in. And so I see that has been a very successful operation.
Yes.
In previous discussions, you've also have prioritized the post office, utilizing your K-9 units. And so now you have additional K-9s coming in, and you're requesting more K-9 units for this upcoming budget. And I want to applaud you for looking for the resources to bring those K-9 dogs in. Thank you very much, Director, and thank you also, Chief, to the team that worked whatever logistics that was needed to make that happen. I do think that, I know that C&QA needs more support in guarding our ports of entry, to include the Port Authority of Guam and the airport. And you need to expand your K-9 services as well. I think you should be a little bit more bold when we are trying to build C&QA up to really be able to be given better resources for our officers to perform their job and to the fullest of their capacity. And so I hope that we can see an adjustment on the money, the budget that you're asking for, and ask for an increase of that. Because it seems to me that this budget presented here today is mildly conservative to what C&QA really needs to perform their job and to protect the island from any type of invasive species or from any type of drugs entering into our ports. And I hope that we can see an adjusted request for an increase for C&QA. Mr. Chair, this is a very conservative number. Seriously, especially when we're talking about our K-9 units, we're talking about them being able to operate. There is concern on the slide where your FY23 goals, where you're hiring 20 C&QA trainees, and you're also filling 10 vacancies with additional C&QA trainees. The concern is do you have the personnel in line to execute when that money does come forward? Do you?
Noted.
Okay. So, and And Chief, you speak about the restructuring plan of the law enforcement pay and reorganizing that structure. And I agree with you that we do need to move towards that avenue where the promotion rate and the recruitment rate meets the needs of the island of Guam, because right now, because of the limited resources, because of the limited revenue, especially because we don't have any we don't have the same amount of passengers coming in, we are decreasing the capabilities of C&QA. However, we still need to ensure that we protect our island because the need is still there. The needs of the island has not changed. And so I hope that the Post Commission can really put something forward. Many of us in leadership positions work the extra time, don't get paid the extra amount of dollars, but we create the plan. And once that plan is created, it can be executed. So if the Post Commission creates the plan, the legislature can act. And so I applaud your work as the chair in the Post Commission. We've been talking about this for 4 years, changing the structure of how they are paid. So I hope to see it come to fruition sooner than later. Okay. And then, remember Officer John Ree, we were exploring a task force for the, or a team for the electronic manifest?
Yes.
How's that going?
We already submitted a rendition of the rules and regulations based on the manifest law that was passed. It did not meet muster, so we're actually re-examining it again.
Okay.
I could let you know that with the acquisitions of services from the Oceana Customs Organization, they will have the opportunity to take a look at what we're developing, because they will be conducting a diagnostic and complete assessment of how we do things and why we do certain things. So they will be bringing in subject matter expertise that deal specifically for what other nations, based on best practices and other customs administrations, looking at legal structure, looking at current operations, looking at our resources, and balancing out what we really need based on the duties and responsibilities of customs officers. So we worked on it. It wasn't the best. Management knew it wasn't the best. It was thrown back to us to re-examine and improve.
Okay.
Based on what we have.
Okay.
So,
because I know that the efficiency of C&QA is also hindered by this manual input of the manifest. And so I hope that, if there's any help that you need from our office, in whatever sense, right? We're here for C&QA to assist. And perhaps maybe just phase it in. I know they want a whole big plan, but if we can phase it in, crack the door open a little bit, and then, 6 months later, crack the door open a little bit more, we can actually have some traction.
correct.
So if there's a step that we can take moving forward, progress is progress. And so if we can do that, if you need any assistance, we're here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then I have 2 more questions. The HEDA category, high drug trafficking category that the federal government would give additional funds to customs if we are able to receive that type of category. I know it's not very favorable, but have we looked into the possibility of receiving funds through that category? HEDA?
Oh, with respect to HIDA, ma'am, Senator, an application was submitted by the Attorney General.
Okay.
And so we're just waiting for the response.
Is
because it's a new submission date.
Okay.
And so the AG has submitted. That's according to the Chief of Police.
Okay, and is there a timeline on when we will know?
I'm not too sure, but I can check on that.
Okay, thank you very much. One last question. We did have some constituents visit our office who were retired customs and quarantine officers, And they were also concerned about the retroactive hazardous pay from when the law was first enacted. Have all of our officers who are currently on duty and employed, and those that have retired during those years, have they been fully paid out?
Yes, ma'am. I think with the exception of one
Okay.
one officer, and the reason for that is that we have no information insofar as access, but I'll let the ASO explain that.
Yes, like I said, what we ended up doing was also paying it out in phases. So our first phase is we paid out all our active employees, so that was completed, and then we moved on to phase 2, which was to cover the retirees and all the officers that resigned. So yes, as of last week Friday, we paid out all the pending officers, exactly what the director said, with an exception of one we missed, because that officer moved on to another agency, so I don't have access to those files. But I'm working closely with payroll so that we can get that processed.
Okay, thank you.
But as
so
of this date,
And we have the
everything is
funding for that
Right.
included as part of the plan.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, Director, and to your team. Thank you so much for your continued hard work, and thank you to our Customs and Quarantine officers for making the best of the resources that they have and continuing the professional work that they do and protecting our island's ports of entry. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. The simple questions I have. You comment that you have a program already with the post office, right, for drug interdiction? Do you have any program? Because you know you are responsible for the use tax. And I'm just curious because I know 4 years ago, I think some of you were aware of it when I was asking Revenue and Tax, is how we can get customs to get involved with the postal, so when any products coming in that's not taxed would be taxed. Because I know that custom officers are well aware of the law, can only tax one time, but if they escape tax, they can get tagged. Because you do this at all the airport, you do it at the port, but postal, you don't do it because it's similar to like what Saipan is doing. And I know you can't match what Saipan is doing, but I know you guys are creative, and if you can work on it, you don't need to explain about it, just work on it, and if you can get it done, great. Why? Because the stores are not making sales, and everybody online is making sales, and if they're not getting tagged, because my understanding online is you don't have to pay a tax because Guam doesn't have a tax, so you're supposed to get taxed when it comes to Guam. But you guys figure it out because that'll be your area of responsibility. We don't need to discuss that. That's not in the budget. But it could help your budget, okay? On another note, when you talk about the post and you're talking about the tier, you know I'm retired Army, okay? So I'm very familiar when you were talking about that. But I've also asked DOA that there gotta be, and I also asked the chief of police, maybe what the post needs to do is come up with one universal law enforcement peace officer academy. Everybody goes to it. You complete all the law enforcement part, how to arrest and all that stuff. When you comes to your, like in the military, your MOS, your skill, you take off to customs, you take off to the port, you take off to GPD. That's when you break away. That's when your OGT comes into place because already you fulfill, like in the military, it's called the basic training. Then when you get to your line AC, you go into your advanced individual training, which is your field. Then your pay can be uniform, where everybody gets the same basic pay because why? You're all rated as peace officer. You know, even though you say you're custom, you're a peace officer. So if we're gonna go down that formula, that's where I ask, do you have a waiting list? You may have a waiting list to go to the universal law enforcement training. Then you can filter out who would be best to go where. The military does that.
Yeah.
They know you got the brains for certain things, they'll send you to that area. You may go to GPD to be a forensic, or you may go to custom to be one of the canine. And that's something the post, I hope, will look into, and then look into it, take a look at it, consider it, then get back to us. And then like I mentioned when we're talking about funding on special funds, if you start generating more special funds, we will know, we will see it. And because you only can spend what you appropriate, If the money goes up in special fund, then let us know that you would need access to it. So we, the Guam legislature, can sit down and says, let's approve appropriation of that funding because it was mainly geared for you, for customs, so you can access it. See, we're here to help you. We're not here to slow you down. I want you to continue doing what you're doing because you guys do a great job. And the committee will conclude the budget hearing with the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency. The committee will continue to receive testimony. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. @gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, second floor, 761 Marine Corps Drive. Jesus Masi for your attendance and participation in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This budget hearing on Bill 276 CR relative to the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency is duly heard and now adjourned. It is 3:58. Please be safe and take care. And thank you for your service and all your personnel. Thank you, sir.